and welcome to this module in our titration video series. We're going to be covering connectors. So Remi, in the previous versions of titration, when we wanted to speak to external systems, whether that was to generate an alert or ingest some sort of telemetry, we were doing that with standalone appliances. But as of the latest free release of titration, we've merged to this new connectors format. And the connectors format allows us to standardize on two major ways to either ingest metadata or to ingest flow data on that stitching records.
So you're saying that before we had one VM per connector, and now we're saying that we have one VM that can have multiple connectors?
Exactly.
I like that.
Simplifies life quite significantly.
Lazy bear, Tim, lazy bear.
We always want to go for the easy way. And it's also built into the workflow inside the user interface as well. So it's much more simple when you want to deploy a connector.
Okay, you have to take me a bit through that. So it's like pre-provisioning, stuff like that? Or?
Exactly. We're going to walk through exactly what the connectors are, the different types of connectors. And then in another module in this video series, we're going to go through deploying the two connector types as well.
Okay.
So I mentioned two different types of connectors, and that's basically all we have to deal with these days. There is the titration edge that you can see on the left-hand side there, and there is the titration data ingest on the right-hand side. These are some screenshots that I took directly from the titration user interface, so you can see how it visually shows you exactly what different edge appliances or which different data ingest connectors you have enabled. So take a look at the edge on the left-hand side there, Remi. That's really where if we want to send out alerts or if we want to receive metadata from an external system, that is where we are going to connect to those different entities.
I see. So anything that's low volume, that kind of things, extra data, like for example, syslog, but that's maybe more higher volume, Slack, PagerDuty, all that stuff, that would be edge.
Yes, exactly. Basically, we're talking about things that aren't related to flows themselves.
Okay.
And that's why you can see here that we only require one edge connector per tenant.
I see, but you show only three, and I see 3 boxes, but I think there might be more options, right? So what happens?
Yeah, there's many more options, and in fact, there is really no limit to how many different types of external systems you connect to via the titration edge appliance. It's designed to handle them all under that one individual connector because they are relatively lightweight in the grand scheme of things.
I see. So you show 3, but actually it could be 9.
It could be 9.
Okay.
And we'll look through in the subsequent session exactly what those different options are to deploy on top of that connector.
Yeah, and I guess the options are today. I mean, those are things where we can expand, right, in future releases?
Oh, absolutely. So the edge appliance is designed to be that foothold into the environment, and then as we find new and exciting ways to deploy different connectors or integrate with external systems, we'll bring those in and allow you to deploy them via edge as well.
Very nice.
So we have the edge for the lightweight metadata, and then we also now have the data ingest for, quite clearly, ingesting data. This is when we're talking about really more heavyweight data. If we're looking at NetFlow, if we're looking at records from firewalls or from load balancers, titration data ingest is the connector that we would be using. So you can see on the screen here that it's one or more data ingest appliances. And that's because it's designed to scale horizontally. Think about ingesting flow data. You might get to a point where you would be ingesting too much flow data for one virtual machine. So it makes sense to start expanding that out horizontally and deploying the number of data ingest appliances that you require for your scalability concerns.
That's one thing, actually. It's good you talk about that because I got confused in the previous. When you actually say syslog, it's actually syslog outbound, not inbound, right?
Correct.
Oh, yeah, so that's why it's so low volume.
Yes, yeah. We're not using any of this data to ingest into titration when we're referring to edge. It's always leaving the titration appliance, apart from if it's lightweight metadata, and we see that in the case of ICE.
I see. Makes total sense.
Yeah. So let's dive a little bit deeper into exactly what those different appliances look like and the connectivity that we would expect from them.
Okay. Show me a bit.
So in this diagram, I have the titration edge appliance, and this is a very high-level overview of exactly what happens. So you have your titration cluster on the left-hand side. You have the titration edge appliance on the right-hand side, and then you have the different devices or the different entities that it can connect to either send data to or receive that data.
Okay.
So the first thing that you will notice is that the edge appliance can sit outside of the titration network.
Is that the, okay, I was like, so that it's boxed basically here, there's a titration network.
Yes.
It can have some form of magical connection. Again, magic is back.
Yes.
Back to the appliance there, but I don't need to ask to configure a proxy on titration, right?
No, you don't. And this means that if you would like to send alerts to some sort of alert destination that is only reachable inside your data center, and you don't want to allow the titration cluster inbound access to that, that titration edge appliance can sit there as a proxy in between your cluster and the end alert destination that you're trying to go to. Let's say I want to send it to a syslog server that's only reachable with inside my data center's IP space.
Oh, so if I'm using titration as a service, for example,
yes.
My appliance is what? Titration?
Somewhere in the cloud, right?
It's magic again. And to make sure that I can send something to my syslog, I probably don't want to expose syslog over internet.
Doesn't seem like the most secure thing that you could do.
I would agree with you. So I can just put a VM inside, and this VM will actually connect outbound towards the titration cluster.
Yes.
Over normal protocols.
Over 443.
Oh, perfect. So proxy, all that stuff gets out, talks to the cloud, and I'm done.
Yes.
Very nice.
That's it. And in fact, in this diagram, you will see that the direction isn't actually pointed out, but the initiation of the connection, again, is from the edge appliance towards the titration cluster. So you don't need to open up inbound firewall rules on your network to deploy the edge appliance.
Okay, very cool.
So that's covering the edge appliance, and like we mentioned, there is only one of these. You only need to deploy one per tenant, and we'll go into configuring that in a later module.
Okay.
So to pair with the edge appliance, we also have the ingest appliance, and let's look at that. And in fact, it is pretty much exactly the same model. You have the titration cluster on the left-hand side, you have the ingest appliance, but the difference here is that you can see that we've deployed two ingest appliances in this environment. That's because we want to only have a maximum of 3 different connectors enabled per data ingest appliance.
This actually makes sense. Do you separate like campus-related appliances from other related appliances?
Exactly. And to keep it scalable and to make sure that we're not overrunning the CPU or the memory or asking for a gigantic ingest appliance, we want to be able to help you scale out horizontally.
Are you going to ask for like a 128 gig VM or?
In this case, I'm not going to ask for a very big VM. You know, this is a reasonable VM with reasonable resource requirements. We're actually going to deploy that virtual machine in the deployment module for connectors. So we'll see exactly what the size of that is, and you'll be able to see that that's a reasonable requirement for you there.
Okay, I'm happy to hear that.
It follows the same connectivity model. It's a secure channel between the titration cluster and the ingest appliance, and that is done with the initiation of that channel from the ingest appliance to the titration cluster.
I see. I'm going to ask you a question, Tim. You see it coming, I'm sure.
What's the question that you'd like to ask me, Remi?
I think we won't be able to demo F5 today.
I don't think we're going to be able to demo F5 today because we didn't get any licenses for our lab, which is unfortunate, but we're going to be able to demo some other connectors in this lab.
Awesome. I want to be sure of that.
Unfortunately so. But we can look at some of the other ones like the AVI or the AnyConnect or the NetScaler environment, which is how we might be able to pull in flow data, NAT stitching, information about the workloads in AWS via VPC flow logs, all of those other sources of telemetry that we can pair with the software agent we can bring in via the data ingest appliance.
Oh, you said NAT stitching. So those are the ones when we're referring into the agent overview section, we're talking about different kind of agents. That's where the stitching actually comes through.
Yes, that's exactly it. So you can deploy the connector for one of your load balancers or for your firewall, and then you can bring that information in to pair those different flows together that have been stitched by that device.
Very nice. So 2 appliances, well, and actually, do I need to do them every time, by the way? I mean, to get my titration working correctly, is that a mandatory step?
No, this is absolutely not a mandatory step. If you are not looking to send alerts out of titration, or if you're not looking to ingest flow data or NAT stitching from external sources, there is no need to deploy either the edge or the ingest appliance. They are totally optional, and you can enable them as and when you see fit.
Very cool. So I can start the usual way, simple, software sensors only, expand as I go through. I see a need for NAT stitching, for example, campus to LAN. I integrate with ICE, for example. So that brings me one ingest, one edge VM that would need to be deployed. Once I deploy those 2 VMs, I can continue expanding on the edge to as many connectors as we have,
yep.
and up to 3 connectors per ingest VM on that one.
Yes.
Easy.
Okay.
I like that.
Sounds easy in theory, right?
Absolutely.
So thank you for joining us in this overview of connectors. If you would like more information about connectors or titration in general, please visit cisco.com/go/titration.